Old Hollywood looked like heaven on a movie screen, but behind the golden lights, shadows moved. Admirers turned into stalkers. Fame became a cage. And for 16 of the era's brightest stars, obsession wasn't admiration, it was danger. Welcome to a journey through the hidden darkness of classic Hollywood, where the price of stardom was measured not just in contracts and premieres, but in sleepless nights, blocked hotel corridors, and the constant, suffocating weight of being watched. These weren't just famous actresses. They were icons, goddesses projected onto silver screens in an age when celebrity meant something absolute, something unreachable. But that distance only made certain admirers hungrier. In the golden age of film, there were no anti-stalking laws. California wouldn't pass its first statute until 1990. The word itself didn't exist in legal terms. What we call stalking today was simply life. Threatening letters arrived by the hundreds. Fans camped outside homes for days. Photographers formed human walls around cars. Security guards struggled to hold back crowds that pressed forward like tides. And the stars? They smiled for the cameras, signed the autographs, and went home to bolt their doors. This video uncovers 16 true accounts of old Hollywood's most luminous actresses who lived under the shadow of obsessive pursuit. Some faced individual fixations that turned menacing. Others endured waves of intrusive attention, so relentless it resembled psychological siege. Each story is different, some chilling, others heartbreaking, all of them revealing the brutal cost of being desired by millions. Because beneath the glamour, beneath the red carpets and magazine covers, was a truth Hollywood didn't advertise. Fame made you visible to everyone. And when everyone can see you, someone will always be watching too closely. Someone will always take it too far. These stars learned that lesson in ways that still echo today. Quiet, persistent, and impossible to forget. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe didn't just have fans. She had millions of people who believed they knew her, understood her, could save her. The press followed her like a second shadow, cameras flashing at every moment. Public and private dissolved into one endless performance. By 1962, she couldn't walk down a street without crowds forming. The siege was constant. Phone calls at 3 a.m. from strangers who'd somehow gotten her number. Letters that started with adoration and ended with demands. Men who showed up at studio gates insisting they were meant to be together, that the movies had sent them a message. Security became a permanent fixture, but it was never quite enough. What made it unbearable wasn't any single incident. It was a totality. Every day, everywhere, someone was watching. Someone was taking notes. Someone was convinced that if they just got close enough, she would see them, really see them, and everything would change. The press stakeouts turned her final months into a spectacle. When she died, thousands lined the streets for her funeral. Marilyn Monroe's life was a masterclass in what happens when desire turns into entitlement. The world wanted to own her, and in a way, it did. Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn moved to the world like a whisper, elegant, controlled, deeply private. But privacy is a myth when your face defines an era. From the moment Roman holiday made her a star, the crowds began gathering. Airports became gauntlets. Hotel lobbies turned into scenes from her own films, except the mob pressing forward wasn't scripted. She was pursued relentlessly, not by one dangerous figure, but by hundreds who saw her grace as an invitation. Fans waited outside restaurants for hours just to glimpse her leaving. Paparazzi tracked her movements across Europe, trading tips on where she'd be next. At premieres, security had to lock arms to create a corridor thin enough for her to pass through. The letters told a different story. Some were sweet, some desperate. Others crossed into darker territory. Admirers who wrote as though they had a claim on her, as though her kindness on screen meant something personal. Studio security quietly intercepted the most disturbing ones. What haunted Audrey wasn't violence, but volume. The sheer number of people who felt they deserved a piece of her. She learned to move quickly, to keep her eyes down, to let her team form human shields. The elegance was real, but so was the exhaustion beneath it. Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly's life split into the moment she became royalty. Before Monaco, she was Hollywood's coolest blonde. After, She became a living fairy tale, and fairy tales attract obsession like moths to a flame. The paparazzi frenzy reached a breaking point at Cannes. Photographers didn't just follow her. They formed a human barricade around her car, a wall of cameras so dense the vehicle couldn't move. Flash bulbs exploded. Hands pressed against windows. Security fought to carve out inches of space while Grace sat trapped inside, the princess in a very different kind of tower. Monaco's gates didn't stop the siege. Photographers camped outside the palace with long lenses, waiting for a glimpse of her on the balcony, in the gardens, anywhere. Letters poured in by the thousands, some adoring, others unsettling, admirers who believed marrying a prince meant she owed them something, as though her life was still a movie they bought tickets to. She'd traded Hollywood for a throne, but the scrutiny only intensified, because now she wasn't just famous. She was mythology, and myths don't get to walk alone, don't get to have quiet mornings or unplanned drives. Every moment was documented, dissected, owned. Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor lived her life in headlines, and the crowds followed every one. When her affair with Richard Burton exploded into public view in the early 1960s, the paparazzi didn't just cover the story. They became part of it. Cameras turned into weapons, stalking her through Rome, Paris, London, capturing every stolen glance. Every private moment turned spectacle. Airport arrivals became circuses. Fans and photographers formed walls of bodies and flashbulbs, security barely able to create a path through the chaos. Hotel stakeouts lasted for days, camera crews waiting in shifts. The press set up outside her homes, outside courthouses during her legal battles, outside hospitals when her health faltered. But it wasn't just professionals. Fans waited in lobbies, slipped notes under doors, called her rooms at midnight. Some were sweet, some delusional, others vaguely threatening. Letters that demanded she explain herself, justify her choices, as though her fame came with an obligation to answer for her life. What made Elizabeth Taylor's story different was endurance. She survived decades of this. Cameras in her face during her highest highs and lowest lows, a constant chorus demanding she perform even when the curtain should have closed. She became a survivor of obsession itself. Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman didn't just face obsessive fans. She faced an entire nation's fury. When her affair with director Roberto Rossellini became public in 1950, the backlash wasn't whispered gossip. It was institutional rage. A U.S. senator denounced her on the Senate floor as a powerful influence for evil. Newspapers called for her exile. Hate mail flooded in by the thousands. She disappeared from America for nearly a decade. She couldn't return without risking mobs. The public's adoration had flipped into something colder, meaner, a moral panic dressed up as righteousness. People who'd never met her felt betrayed. The letters kept coming, forwarded through intermediaries, some threatening, others just cruel. This wasn't one fixated individual. It was a culture-wide pile-on, an entire society playing stalker. The press hounded her across Europe. Photographers waiting outside every hotel, every restaurant. Even years later, after she'd won her way back into Hollywood's graces, the shadow lingered. Ingrid Bergman's story is a reminder that obsession doesn't need a single face. Sometimes in a crowd, a country, a collective delusion that a star owes the public ownership of her choices. She reclaimed her career, but the cost was exile, years spent looking over her shoulder. Judy Garland. Judy Garland's final years were haunted by crowds. In 1969, struggling financially and emotionally, she performed in London, and the stage door scenes became nearly violent. Fans mobbed her on the street, pressing forward until security could barely hold the line. Photographers documented all. Judy looking wary, overwhelmed, her husband trying to shield her. His hands reached out, voices shouted, cameras flashed. It wasn't love in those moments. It was need. Fans wanted a piece of her, proof they'd been close to the legend. They didn't see exhaustion. They didn't see fear. They saw Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, forever young, forever available. The letters were worse. Some sweet, others desperate, a few deeply disturbing. Admirers who believed Judy owed them something, who couldn't accept that she was human, fragile, struggling. Security intercepted what they could. But the volume was relentless. Phone calls at all hours. Fans camping outside hotels. A life lived under siege. Judy died that same year, and the crowds came again, this time to mourn. The same public that had mobbed her in the streets now grieved the loss of the icon they'd helped destroy. Obsession doesn't end with death. It just finds new ways to consume. Natalie Wood. Natalie Wood grew up on camera, and the camera never looked away. From child star to leading lady, her life was documented, dissected, owned by a public that believed they knew her intimately. The studio system sold her as America's sweetheart, and audiences bought the fantasy. But with that came the assumption of access. She faced relentless press pursuit. Photographers waited outside her home, trailed her to restaurants, captured her in moments meant to be private. Fans gathered at premieres in numbers, so large security had to form human corridors. Letters arrived constantly, some loving, some strange, others stepping over the line into fixation. Admirers who wrote as though they had a relationship with her. The weight of being watched took its toll. Every relationship became tabloid fodder. Every struggle was headline news. There was no moment that wasn't potentially a photograph, no conversation that couldn't become tomorrow's story. The scrutiny followed her through marriages, through career highs and personal lows. When Natalie died in 1981, the press descended again with intensity that bordered on ghoulish. The same machinery that had built her fame now fed on the mystery of her death. Even decades later, the obsession continues. A star who couldn't escape the lens. Vivien Leigh. Vivien Leigh was beautiful in a way that made people forget she was real. Gone with the Wind turned her into mythology, and myths are always surrounded by believers. Stage doors became shrines. Hotels hired extra security just to manage the crowds that formed whenever she stayed. Theater tours meant gauntlets of admirers pressing forward, hands reaching, voices calling. The letters never stopped. They came from around the world. Declarations of love from strangers, marriage proposals from men who'd never met her, increasingly intense messages from people who believed the connection was real. Studio assistants filtered the most disturbing ones, but the volume was staggering. Hundreds every month. What haunted Vivien wasn't one dangerous figure, but the collective weight of all of them. Every premiere meant security forming tight circles. Every public appearance was meticulously planned to minimize exposure. Photographers camped outside her homes. Fans memorized her routines, showed up at the same restaurants, the same shops, creating the eerie sensation of being tracked without a single threatening word spoken. Vivien Leigh carried the burden of beauty, the way other stars carried scandal. It made her iconic, yes, but it also made her visible in ways that destroyed peace. She performed elegance while her pulse raced beneath. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow's death in 1937 revealed something dark about celebrity obsession. When news broke that she died at 26, crowds descended. Thousands gathered outside the funeral home, pressing against barricades, straining for a glimpse of the casket, the flowers, anything connected to her. The spectacle was ghoulish, not mourning but consumption. But the obsession had started long before. Paul Byrne's death 5 years earlier had triggered a different kind of frenzy, morbid curiosity dressed up as concern. The press camped outside her home for days. Fans sent letters ranging from condolences to conspiracy theories to marriage proposals, as though her widowhood made her somehow more available. Jean Harlow lived under constant scrutiny, her platinum blonde image so iconic that strangers felt ownership over every detail of her life. Studio security had to manage crowds at premieres, reporters who followed her to private dinners, admirers who showed up at her doorstep with gifts and demands. The attention was relentless, suffocating. When she died, the same machinery that had made her famous turned her funeral into a media circus. The crowds that gathered weren't there to honor her. They were there to witness. Jean Harlow became public property in life, and even death couldn't change that. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth's marriage to Prince Ali Khan in 1949 triggered a media frenzy that bordered on violence. The press pursuit was relentless. Photographers blocking roads, camping outside homes, bribing staff for information. Every movement was documented. Security cordons formed at restaurants, hotels, airports, but they could barely hold back the tide. The crowds weren't just photographers. Fans gathered wherever she went, hundreds deep, pressing forward for a glimpse, an autograph, proof they'd been near her. Letters flooded in from around the world. Some adoring, others unsettlingly personal, admirers who wrote as though they knew her intimately. What made Rita's story particularly exhausting was its global scale. She couldn't escape because there was nowhere to go. The fame was international, the obsession borderless. Paris, Cairo, Hollywood, Monaco, everywhere the same scenes repeated. Cameras in her face, crowds blocking her path, security struggling to create space for her to simply move. The marriage eventually collapsed under the weight of constant scrutiny, but the attention didn't stop. Every relationship, every career choice, every appearance was dissected. Rita Hayworth spent decades living in the spotlight, so harsh it burned. She learned to navigate it with practiced grace. But even stars get tired of acting. Clara Bow was the first modern celebrity, and that made her the first to experience modern obsession. As a girl of the 1920s, she didn't just have fans. She had devotees, a generation who saw her as everything they wanted to be or possess. The machinery of fame was just learning how to operate, and Clara became its test subject. The mail arrived in literal sacks. Thousands of letters every month. Fan magazines printing her address. Some letters were sweet, others disturbingly intimate. Admirers who believed the movies were messages meant specifically for them. Studio assistants couldn't keep up. Fans camped outside her home, waited at studio gates for hours, followed her to restaurants and shops. Crowds at premieres pressed forward so aggressively that security had to form human chains. She was mobbed at train stations, surrounded at hotel lobbies, pursued down streets by groups who wanted a piece of her. Clara Bow pioneered fame, but she also pioneered the cost. By her 30s, exhausted and overwhelmed, she stepped away from Hollywood entirely. The obsession had taken something essential: privacy, peace, the ability to exist without an audience. She became a cautionary tale. Be careful what you wish for, because the crowd never stops wishing back. Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr was called the most beautiful woman in the world, and the title became a prison. Every public appearance meant photographers jostling for position, flashbulbs exploding, voices shouting questions designed to provoke a reaction. Her beauty wasn't just admired. It was dissected, documented, commodified by a press that treated her like a specimen. Fans trailed her constantly. Not one obsessive individual, but waves of them, rotating faces with the same hungry look. They waited outside restaurants, memorized her routines, showed up at the same shops and salons, creating an atmosphere of constant surveillance. Letters arrived daily, some admiring, others veering into fixation. Studio security formed tight circles around her at events, but even that couldn't stop the crush. Crowds pressed forward at premieres, hands reaching through the barrier. The attention was relentless, exhausting, a spotlight that never dimmed. Even her scientific work, the patent she co-invented, was dismissed by a public that only wanted to see her as a beautiful face. What haunted Hedy wasn't threats of violence. It was a psychological way to being constantly watched, constantly judged, constantly reduced to a single dimension. She became, in her own words, a prisoner of beauty, trapped in an image the world refused to see beyond. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge faced a different kind of obsession, one wrapped in the ugly realities of segregated America. As one of the first black actresses to achieve major Hollywood stardom, she was both idolized and targeted, celebrated in some spaces and threatened in others. The attention she received was filtered through racial tensions, making even ordinary encounters potentially dangerous. Performing at venues like the Moulin Rouge in Las Vegas, Dorothy drew enormous crowds, but also menacing attention. Threatening phone calls and disturbing letters arrived with alarming frequency, some from people who resented her success, others from admirers whose fixation took on sinister edges. Security wasn't just managing enthusiasm, it was managing hostility. The fan magazines that celebrated white actresses often excluded her, Yet the obsessive attention continued in other forms. Men who claimed to adore her could turn threatening when she didn't respond. The boundary between adoration and intimidation was dangerously thin. Dorothy Dandridge lived under a unique kind of siege, famous enough to draw obsession, but not protected enough to feel safe. The threats she faced were both personal and institutional. Individual fixations magnified by a culture that saw her as both icon and target. She walked a tightrope, always aware that the wrong step could end in violence. Greta Garbo just wanted to be left alone. It became her most famous line and her most impossible wish. From the moment she tried to retreat from Hollywood, the press and public became obsessed with tracking her down. Photographers made entire careers out of Garbo watching, camping outside her New York apartment with long lenses, hiding in doorways, following her on daily walks. The surveillance was constant and meticulous. Neighbors reported her routines to tabloids. Strangers memorized her schedule, showing up at the same corners at the same time. She'd leave her building and find photographers waiting across the street, cameras trained on her door. The privacy she craved was stolen frame by frame, sold to magazines that fed the public's hunger to see the recluse. Fans wrote letters begging her to return to film, demanding explanations, some angry that she'd taken herself away, as though her retirement was a personal betrayal. Others were more disturbing. Admirers who believed they understood her, who wrote as though they were kindred spirits. Greta Garbo's life became a decades-long game of hide and seek, except she was the only one who wanted it to end. The more she withdrew, the more valuable her image became. Even in her 80s, photographers still followed, still waited, still watched. Lana Turner. Lana Turner's life played out like one of her melodramas, and the crowds gathered for every act. When personal crises exploded into public view, courtroom battles, family tragedies, relationship scandals, the press and fans ascended like locusts. Barricades went up outside her home, but they barely held. Photographers camped on the sidewalk in shifts. Courthouse appearances became circuses. Crowds pushed against barriers, shouting questions, reaching toward her as security fought to clear her path. Cameras flashed in her face, reporters shoving microphones forward, demanding she explain, confess, perform her grief for public consumption. Every private tragedy became headline news, every intimate detail entertainment. The letters were overwhelming. Some offered sympathy, others condemnation, and a disturbing number were from admirers who saw her vulnerability as an invitation. They wrote as though they could save her, claiming to understand her in ways no one else did. What made Lana's story particularly cruel was timing. Each crisis attracted a new wave of attention just as the previous one was fading. She never got to heal privately. Every stumble was documented. Every moment of weakness photographed. The obsession wasn't just about fame. It was about drama, the public's appetite for watching beautiful people suffer. And Lana gave them a lifetime of material. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake's peekaboo hairstyle made her iconic, and that icon became a cage. During World War II, she was everywhere. Movie screens, magazine covers, military pinups. The hair became so famous that factories banned it as a safety hazard. The government asked her to change it for the war effort. She complied, and her career never quite recovered. But the obsession with her image never stopped. Photographers trailed her constantly, documenting every appearance, every relationship, every sign that the glamorous image was slipping. Fans waited at restaurant back entrances, camped outside studios, wrote letters that started with adoration and escalated into demands. Some believed they knew the real Veronica, writing as though they had a personal connection. As her star faded, the attention didn't become kinder, it became more invasive. The press documented her financial struggles, her personal setbacks. Former fans felt betrayed, as though her decline was a failure of character. The letters turned judgmental, disappointed, sometimes cruel. Veronica Lake's story is about the violence of being reduced to an image. The world loved her hair, her look, her persona, but never bothered to know the woman underneath. When the image changed, the obsession soured. She learned too late that being worshipped and being seen are two very different things. The camera stopped rolling long ago, but the echoes remain. The soft footsteps outside the gate, the letters that never stopped coming, the look in her eyes when admiration turned into fear. Hollywood sold the dream of being adored by millions, the fantasy of fame so complete it felt like love. But no one warned what happens when someone takes that dream too far. These 16 women lived through an era when stalking wasn't even a word, when the law offered no protection because the crime didn't technically exist. California wouldn't pass its first anti-stalking statute until 1990. The rest of the country followed through the decade. Federal law came in 1996. But for these golden age stars, that protection came too late, or never at all. They navigated a world where obsession was just called devotion, where crowds crushing them at premieres was seen as proof of success, where threatening letters were filed away by studio security and never discussed, where being followed was a price you paid for being famous. And if you complained, you were ungrateful, difficult, not understanding how lucky you were to be desired. But desire without boundaries isn't love. It's possession. It's the belief that fame creates ownership, that putting someone on a pedestal gives you the right to knock them off when they disappoint you. These stars learned that lesson in hotel corridors blocked by admirers, in cars surrounded by photographers, in the 3M phone calls from strangers who somehow got their number, in the quiet terror of knowing someone was always watching. We remember them for their films, their beauty, their talent, and we should. But we should also remember what it cost them to become untouchable icons in an age when being untouchable was a fantasy and being watched was a fact. They were goddesses on screen and prisoners in life, adored by millions who never stopped to ask if all that adoration felt like love or like drowning. The golden age of Hollywood created legends, but legends cast very long shadows. And in those shadows, obsession moved quietly, patiently, waiting for the moment when admiration crossed a line into something far more dangerous. These stars lived in that shadow. They smiled through it, performed through it, survived it when they could. Their stories aren't just history. They're warnings, whispered from an era that built fame without building protection, that created desire without teaching boundaries. The lights have dimmed. The sets have been struck. The studios have changed. But the lesson remains. Fame is a double-edged sword, and the same audience that lifts you up can crush you in their need to get closer.